What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Toyota Sequoia TRD Pro. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with this refreshed Sequoia for 2020 to review for you guys today. So about the TRD Pro version of the Sequoia, well, I've actually never reviewed a Sequoia before, and so this TRD Pro version is the first one that I'm doing here, and is the best one supposedly. It's the top of the range here for the Sequoias, and so it of course has a little bit more of an off-road ready capability than you usually get with normal Sequoias, which otherwise are just nice large body on frame, truck-based SUVs for those who need 3 rows, but don't want to go for something as soft as a Highlander. You have this instead. But the TRD Pro version is really cool. I love this army green color, and there's some really nice additions to it. So first off, as far as exterior goes, up front here, I love that kind of retro Toyota grille you have there. All the accents are blacked out, by the way, here on the TRD Pro, and they all look really good with all the badging and all that kind of stuff being blacked out. You also do have these new LED headlamps, which give the Sequoia a little bit of a refresh look here for 2020, even though the Sequoia in this generation dates back to 2008, so it's definitely dated. But hey, they keep selling, people keep buying them, and no one has an issue with the styling, so Toyota just makes little tweaks here and there. You also, here on the TRD Pro version, have these Rigid Industries LED fog lamps there in the lower part of the front bumper, which is cool, and it's just a very imposing look, especially with that roof rack you have there on the roof. That's very large, and this would be great for overlanding, all that kind of stuff. It really looks like it is ready for adventure. Coming down to the sides, you also have some traction for that adventure because you have these forged BBS 18-inch wheels here on these Michelin all-terrain tires that are a little bit more nubby than normal tires, and you have Fox shocks all around, which I'll talk about more once we hit the road. But there isn't any additional suspension lift here with the TRD Pro version. It's the same ride height as any other Sequoia, but you do have a little bit better traction there, with these tires and wheels. Other things here, you have a front skid plate, which helps, protect the Sequoia whenever you're on your adventures. You also have these TRD running boards here, which are, are very grippy and look very cool with the anodized black look to them. And then going out back there, it's still the same Sequoia, everyone knows and loves. I think the one really cool trick on the Sequoia here is the fact you have a rear window that slides down, which is great for dogs or just for hanging out, tailgating, whatever. Great to have that feature there. And you can also get an optional TRD catback exhaust here. This one does not have that, but if you want a little more growl with your V8 and your Sequoia, you have that option as well. But yeah, overall, I think that the slight little tweaks they made here for 2020 really help the Sequoia to stand out and look a little bit more modern, and I still think it looks really good. All right, so start and go for a drive. The Toyota Sequoia here runs the old Toyota key, which is just this little plasticky fob. Dates back, I don't know, probably 10 years or so. But at least it's small and, does all the basics you need it to do, so not a big deal, I suppose. But of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push-button start. That is one thing they've updated here. You also get a standard push-button start here for 2020 as well. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Sequoia, my wife and I actually did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so you can go watch that. I'll link it above. But basically, this interior feels like it's from 2008 still. Aside from the infotainment system, they did thankfully update this to a new touchscreen, which runs the newest version of Toyota's infotainment software. It has standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And so even though there's a lot of other little things that annoy me about this interior, at least they did update that, and so that's good. So you have all the modern functionality. Everything else, though, feels very old, pretty cheap, and it's very odd in the way that it's set up. But yeah, go watch that video if you want to hear more. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 Sequoia TRD Pro. Well, the first thing you notice, the first thing I notice at least, is you're sitting up very high here in the Sequoia. And also, the way the pedal box is kind of far away, I have to sit kind of close to the steering wheel in order to reach the pedals, being 5'9". So that's just kind of another interesting little thing. So the seating position is a little odd for me personally, but you do have a very commanding view of the road because you're sitting up so high. A-pillar is kind of thick, but you're up so high it doesn't matter. View out of the sides is great. Nice low window sills here. View out of the back is also great. And so it's very easy to drive in that regard. You do have a backup camera as well and a bunch of sensors and stuff, so that's great. Another thing I'm noticing is you have very light steering, but I don't mind it. I think, it still is more precise than something like, a Jeep Wrangler or something like that. It's, still, I think, actually a little more precise than even the 4Runner, for example. And this feels a little tighter than the 4Runner. I just, last year reviewed the TRD Pro version of that, and the suspension was a lot softer, steering was less precise, and all that. This is a little more sharp, and I do appreciate that. But it still is a Toyota truck, and just trucks in general like this aren't going to be I guess most responsive to your input. So your throttle response is a little dull, but honestly it works fine. Brakes also feel actually pretty good. Sometimes Toyota trucks in particular have odd boosting for their brake pedals. This one feels very normal and very easy to modulate, better than the 4Runner and Tundra and all those as well. So I do really like that. And now just pulling it onto a main road, you have buttery smooth power from this 5.7 liter V8 engine, and so it gives you plenty of gusto to get up and moving, even though this is a big, heavy vehicle. This engine, it doesn't feel fast for sure, but there's plenty of power for something like this. It'll be totally sufficient. One thing you'll hear though, now that we're up around 40 miles per hour, is some tire noise. That's one of the penalties you pay with the TRD Pro version, having these 32-inch all-terrain tires. You're going to have more road noise. So that's just the only thing that you'll notice here about the TRD Pro version. Obviously, if you went for the limited or other versions of the Sequoia that don't have these tires, that will quiet down. Otherwise, it's pretty refined in here. Another thing that I'm really surprised about actually is the TRD Pro. They said the spring rate is a little softer than the other versions of the Sequoia. And now again, I have not reviewed a regular Sequoia to compare, but what I will say is that this feels, again, like it's even though it's softer with the spring rate and stuff, it feels like it's again, more buttoned down than the 4Runner, which I'm actually appreciating because it gives you better on-road feeling and handling, and so I do really like that. You do have Fox shocks all around. They're dampers that are 2.5-inch dampers in the front, internal bypass dampers, and then in the rear they're 2 inches, so a little bit smaller there, but also get the job done very well. Well, let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. We'll slap it over into the sport mode here for the transmission, and here we go. All right, wow, really responsive. Way more so than I was expecting. Wow. So the Sequoia TRD Pro here runs, like I said, the 5.7 liter naturally aspirated V8 engine. It does 381 horsepower and 401 pound-feet of torque. And 0 to 60, I don't think is officially even quoted, but I think it's just under 7 seconds or so for the 0 to 60. Not like it matters for a vehicle like this, but it does a pretty good job. So we have a 6-speed automatic transmission here, which is also pretty old. Again, showing this vehicle's roots, but I haven't had any issues with it. It seems to, obviously with this V8 engine is also paired up for, having tons of torque at very low RPM. So, it always feels like you have plenty of power. And, I mean, sometimes you'll wait a little bit longer than you'd like for a downshift. Not a huge deal. Again, in a vehicle like this, you kind of have to go into it with a preconceived notion that it is old. You can't expect it to drive like a Highlander or something. And it is, of course, again, truck-based, body on frame. So it's, not going to be quite as agile as all the newer, higher tech stuff is. But in the sport mode here, though, it's seems more eager to leave the transmission in a lower gear to give me a little bit more power here. But we'll go ahead and knock it out of that sport mode, and then the revs fall and it kind of chills out. And it's a really nice thing to cruise. Aside from the road noise, like I mentioned, from those tires, this is a really nice vehicle to just cruise around in. I actually have been enjoying it, and I actually really grew to love the 4Runner as well in my time of driving it, because it was so dramatic with the way that the suspension was so soft. But this being a little bit sharper, but still having that rough and ready type vibe to it, I think is actually kind of fun. And I really like the way that it drives whenever you're just cruising around behind rush hour traffic and all that kind of stuff. But we're coming up with some corners here, and let's see how the Sequoia handles them. So yeah, so like I said, steering's nice and light, but that actually means that, turn-in is fairly eager for a vehicle that's this big and this high and stuff. And handling actually isn't bad. One thing I keep noticing with all these vehicles that have these, Fox shocks or any kind of off-road type setup is it seems like it really benefits the handling on the road as well. And so, yes, it is going to be more capable off-road as well. They have better rebound rates and all that kind of stuff. I'm not an off-roader, so I can't really go into all that stuff for you. But what I will say is that this just seems like it translates to better on-road handling as well. And again, I have not driven a regular Sequoia to compare, but I'm pretty impressed with this. It handles better than I was expecting it to, honestly. Obviously, you're going to have some lean, and like I said, it's not super precise or anything, but if you are in a hurry and you happen to be going around some corners and stuff, I think it actually handles itself fairly well, again, for what it is. And so as far as that goes, I'm pretty impressed. Another thing to mention about the driving experience here in the Sequoia is that you have Toyota Safety Sense 2.0 here in the Sequoia now as standard for 2020, and that's great. So that gives you the adaptive cruise control with their lane trace assist system and lane departure warning to help keep you within your lanes. It also has blind spot monitoring and automatic emergency braking, all that kind of stuff as well. So you have all the newest safety tech here, which is really great. Toyota's been basically spreading it across their entire lineup now, and has been doing a really good job of keeping all that stuff up to date, even on these very old models like this one. And so that's great. Another thing to mention here is the four-wheel drive system. So you have a manual four-wheel drive system here in the Sequoia. So you have this knob down here. It'll normally be rear-wheel drive and the two-wheel drive mode. Then you can slide over into 4-high, and then that is basically like an automatic four-wheel drive mode where it will have all four wheels engaged on the road, and doesn't hurt the four-wheel drive system or anything. And then there's a center locking differential, and so you can do that, and then it's actually in like a 4-high mode where you shouldn't be driving it on hard concrete with that. And there's also 4-low to help you crawl a little bit better whenever you are venturing on some low-speed trails and things like that. So cool that it has all that, but again, for those who are used to just a normal all-wheel drive system or something like that, you do have to kind of control it yourself here, at least as long as you want the 4-wheel drive. Otherwise, you can just drive around in rear-wheel drive mode all the time and be totally fine as well. But yeah, so otherwise though, I don't have this vehicle as long as I usually do for other press vehicles, so I'm not able to do a real world fuel economy test. But what I can say is that people that buy Sequoias shouldn't really be worried about fuel economy anyway, because the fuel economy is not great. Their EPA rating is 13 in the city, 17 on the highway, and 14 combined. And just in my little bit of driving here doing this review, so far I've been getting 9.4 mpg, but that also included some idling while I was filming the interior and stuff, so that's like a worst case scenario. Chances are, usually in my week of driving a vehicle and stop and go suburban traffic, all that kind of stuff, I typically get like 1 mpg less, so I would predict that I would end up getting about a 13 or maybe 14 mpg for my fuel economy after a week of driving or so. Obviously, if you do more highway driving, stuff like that, your mileage could vary, but according to the EPA, the best you're going to see is about 17 miles to the gallon. Again, it's an old V8, it's a big, heavy, old SUV, but one of the reasons why you might choose the Sequoia over something like a Highlander or any of the other competitors is that you can tow 7,100 pounds here in the Sequoia, even in the TRD Pro version here, which is great. And so that's usually one of the reasons why people buy these large body-on-frame SUVs. I will say you do have more space than a Highlander in the back and stuff, so that is another benefit, but it's not a huge difference from a Highlander, but you do certainly get more space. But if you're not worried about the space, just keep in mind you can tow a lot more than a Highlander and all the other vehicles that are unibody and stuff like that. I will say the Durango tows pretty close to this, even though that is unibody. But the other stuff, as far as competition goes, with body-on-frame V8 powered SUVs, you really have the Chevy Tahoe, GMC Yukon, those vehicles, but even those can get pretty expensive here, especially with their all-new versions. They can get well beyond this vehicle's as-tested price of $66,000, which again is like a fully loaded Sequoia because you have all the off-road stuff and everything like that. Even the Chevy and the GMC, with the new versions especially, I'm sure you'll be able to get those, well over 70 grand if you have one comparably equipped. There is also another similarly dated SUV competitor to this, which is the Nissan Armada, which also has an old V8. It's an old big, body-on-frame SUV that also can tow a lot and stuff. And so that is another thing to consider if you don't mind the age of these vehicles and stuff. And I haven't reviewed an Armada, so I can't say for sure, whether I would, go for this or that. I do like that Toyota has, again, their newest infotainment software in here, and you have the Toyota reliability, which is the last thing and always one of the biggest selling points of Toyotas is the reliability. And this one in particular, you should have a lot of confidence in the Sequoia. One, because it's been around for 12 years, so chances are they've worked out all all the bugs, if there were any to begin with anyway, it should have, you know, no issues in that regard. The engine powering this thing, by the way, is the same thing as in the Tundra, which famously there was a guy that did over 1 million miles in his Tundra with a very similar V8, just doing normal maintenance and stuff. So, you know, conceivably this thing could run basically forever and be obviously very rugged. You got the off-road stuff here at the TRD Pro versions. You can go anywhere, drive wherever you want for a long, long time to come with the Sequoia here. And I know for a lot of people that peace of mind is, you know, a really strong selling point to have something, have a motor that could conceivably go 1 million miles, have a very solid vehicle that, you know, can handle whatever you throw at it, has tons of space. You know, as long as you don't mind, like I said, paying for expensive fill-ups very frequently. Other than that, you know, I can really see the appeal of the Sequoia, even though it is so old. And yes, I would like them to do a new version, and hopefully they will in a few years. And if you want something newer, like I said, you have the Highlander, which is a fantastic choice. You also have some stuff from Lexus, which will feel a little bit nicer on the inside. But those actually tend to have a more dated infotainment system. They're not touchscreen usually, and just, you know, it seems like Lexus hasn't been updating stuff as quickly as Toyota has. So just something to keep in mind there. But you do have the Lexus stuff like the GX, which I just reviewed, if you're curious to see stuff like that. But I think the way the third row in this is set up is better than the Lexus GX and stuff as well. So I think personally I'd probably rather go for one of the Toyotas over one of the Lexuses, you know, if price is a factor for you. But yeah, overall, like I said, there's a lot to like about the Sequoia here, and I can see the charm of it. Personally, you know, I'd probably rather go for a Highlander or something like that, to have something a little bit more modern, or, you know, one of the other competitors to the Highlander. But if you do want to tow a bunch and you want something that's very rugged, being body on frame and stuff, this is still an excellent choice. And it's great that Toyota keeps making them. You know, Toyota, they're just like, well, if people keep buying them, we'll keep making them, and that's the way it's been for many years now, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I commend Toyota for having the bravery to keep their old stuff around for those, you know, people who still love that. But yes, that's all my thoughts on the Sequoia here. Let me know your thoughts on the TRD Pro version of the Sequoia in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.